We are recording right now. Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast, sponsored by Big O Tires. It's Friday, October 11th, and I'm your host, Blair Kerkhoff. College Football Friday is here. Mizzou returns to SEC play against Ole Miss. And star columnist Vahe Gregorian stops by to talk about the Tigers. He surprised me with a stat. Kansas State and Kansas do not play this weekend, but it's not a bye week for Kellis, Robinett, and Newell. They join us to talk Wildcats and Jayhawks. KU has a new offensive coordinator, by the way. We talk about that with Jesse. Later, Sporting Kansas City season is over, earlier than expected given the expectations entering this season. Sam McDowell, who covered Sporting for most of the year, stopped by the studio to discuss what went wrong, what went right, but mostly wrong, for Sporting KC this season. Vahe Gregorian, star columnist, was at Columbia earlier this week for a column that I really enjoyed. And we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon, even though it's Friday. We're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. And Vahe, you came up with a stat before we came into the podcast studio that made me stop in my tracks because I had to think about it for a second and said, gosh darn, you're right. That over the last 25 games, Missouri is 18-7. You know, outside of the usual suspects, Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, Ohio State, I imagine there aren't 20 teams in the country that are 18-7 over the last 25 games dating to last year. And maybe, 25? We're looking at the previous 2 years.
As ever, your imagination is fertile and on target. The record of 18-7 in the last 25 games is fourth best among SEC schools. And I believe, there it is, ninth best among Power 5 schools.
How about that?
So that's pretty good.
That's very good. And I don't think that there is a perception that it's been that good for Missouri for a few reasons, right? The success in 2018 came in the second half of the year after some real gut-wrenching losses. I never can forget the Kentucky game. And then, of course, this year's season opener against Wyoming, which was such a disappointing loss. But Tigers haven't lost since then. They play Ole Miss Saturday night, 6 o'clock, SEC game number 2, right? They already beat South Carolina at home, and Ole Miss is the second SEC opponent. They've wrapped up non-conference games. Missouri got some bad news this week, though. Wasn't this week. They got it last Saturday in the Troy game with the loss of Cale Garrett. What a terrible loss for the Tigers.
It is a terrible loss, and it is that rare guy that is – maybe spiritual is the wrong word, but some kind of emotional leader and, the voice of the defense, and who happens to lead the SEC in tackling and the nation in defensive touchdowns with 3.
It won in each of the last 3 games.
Which is remarkable and ties into another really remarkable stat. The last 4 games, Missouri's defense has scored 35 points. Opposing offenses have scored 31. Missouri's defense has outscored the opposition 35-31 since the Wyoming game.
Yeah, so this is what we expected when Barry Odom became the head coach.
A little bit of that. That's exactly right. And look, we'll see the proof as we go, right? But I think you can make a reasonable case right now, entering this game, that the will of Barry Odom, whatever the culture of Barry Odom, whatever is basically taking, right? We're about where you are when you're program building. 3, 4, 5 years, it's all your own recruits. Your vision permeates a little more all the time. If, in fact, you're an effective communicator, which I think Barry has only become more and more so. I'm quite impressed with Barry's demeanor at press conferences, Barry's, which I assume translates to his ability to reach his players.
Communication, right?
And
it's communication
I think he's quite earnest, and I like his energy. I've seen in the last 2 years particularly Barry just, to me anyway, get more comfortable in his own skin, more trust around him, and I think it's all manifesting what we see on the field. Now, Barry used this term earlier in the week, and it stayed with me. That's great. We're 4-1, et cetera, et cetera. We're 3.5 hours away from being fools and not having any idea what we're doing.
I love that line.
It was a great line. And I was like, yeah.
He's absolutely right.
That's true. In fact, get that lead going for whoever's writing the game. No, I'm teasing. But it's a great way to look at it. And I think coaches constantly have to find ways to keep good teams on track, right, and find ways to lift struggling teams out of it. I think this is Barry's new challenge: how to keep a good team on track. What apparently is, I think, a really stout and good defense. It hurts, obviously, to lose Cale Garrett, but I don't think he's the only reason the defense has been good.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly a heart and soul guy, which is what Barry Odom called him this week. I'll tell you what, the news from Saturday with the victory over Troy could have been doubly worse.
Yeah.
If Kelly Bryant's injury proved to be more serious. Now, like again, we're recording this late Wednesday afternoon. Maybe some news will have occurred in the next 48 hours or so, but all signs indicate that he's going to be okay with the knee injury.
Yeah, that's what everything seemed to be. He used the term 90% as of Tuesday. He was full go. I'd be rather astonished if anything changes that says he can't go. What's really interesting about the Missouri offense is they've won these last 4 games in such runaway fashion that second halves they've actually been pretty limited. In fact, Derek Dooley, the offensive coordinator, spoke a little bit about this, about the complexity of being up 42-3 or 7 or whatever it was at halftime. When you want to get Kelly's backup, Tyrone Power, in there and get him some action, but you're holding back. It's because the higher calling for them was not run up the score on Troy, and
right.
I appreciate that. And but part of the reason I bring that up is that Derek also used the term that suggesting that the offense was a little bit under wraps. We're just kind of running clock for a lot of these last few games. So I don't know if that means there's plenty of stuff to see that they haven't uncorked yet. I like Bryant here. I think he's demonstrably gotten more comfortable with the offense for a guy who threw for, I think, 400 yards in his first game, but made some big mistakes.
Right.
But I don't know what he's fully capable of yet.
Well, we will know more about this offense. I don't think the offense is going to feel as comfortable in the next several games, or the rest of the season, in fact, as it has in the past few weeks. With the non-conference schedule now completed, Ole Miss in Columbia on Saturday, and then it's just a series of it's all SEC from here on in, and look, the conference is shaping up, or let's just say the division anyway. Missouri's the East Division for the Tigers, shaping up kind of how we thought it might, with Georgia taking off and Florida Florida's had some nice wins and up there in the top 10, and both of those programs are they're before Missouri's got both of them coming up on the schedule. They really handled Florida a year ago. Georgia's been the one that's been the puzzle for the Tigers. Have defeated them once, right? In Georgia,
which was I would argue maybe one of the most significant wins in Missouri history. I guess that was that 2014 SEC West
championship
title.
Season, right.
Did I say West? I mean West?
East Division. They played for the SEC title that year. They won it. It won it between the hedges, as I recall.
Yeah, it was an amazing game. I think the one moment you saw Dorial Green Beckham, maybe not the one moment, but a moment.
A moment for him.
But look, as you look at the schedule, just sort of pertaining to what you said, I think you said this a couple weeks ago, and I think it still holds true. I don't know do you know what the odds makers have done with this game?
I don't. I'm sorry.
But I think Missouri's favored.
As you talk,
I'll keep talking. I can do that.
I will get it.
But I think if we just had to base it on where Missouri is to now, you would favor Missouri in all but two of its remaining games. Those being
Georgia
at Georgia and Florida.
Right.
And I think this is an interesting way to look at this, if I say so myself. We ought to expect Missouri to be 9-3 if it's making good on where it is, and that 10-2 should not be out of the question.
Well, 10-2 would require a victory we're not expecting.
Right, which would mean probably Florida at home. I suppose at Georgia is the least likely, but I'd sure like to see Missouri go into that game on riding whatever it would be, a 6-7 game winning streak, and playing to capacity. I think that'd be an awfully enticing game.
12-point favorite. The Tigers are
12-point favorite, which I think is a little high.
Might be, especially if there's a little hobble to Kelly Bryant.
Yeah, and Barry Odom used this number earlier in the week. I've not had a chance to independently verify it, but he said that Ole Miss is running for 310 yards a game in SEC play.
Okay.
That seems like some pretty serious yards per game in SEC play. And interestingly enough, they're only averaging 234 overall, so maybe we don't have their non-conference thing in front of us. At least I don't, but you, the guru,
again, you
so quickly able to cue you up for these things, meaning I'm making up for my lack of preparation. But luckily, you're here, Blair.
I find that kind of incredible, actually. So let's.
Yeah, it does seem incredible. So we're calling up.
Well, this can't be right. In SEC play, they played Alabama and Vanderbilt, Arkansas early on. So they are 3-3 overall, and 2-1 in SEC play. Obviously losing to Alabama. I don't know. Maybe I'm not going to distrust Barry on this.
Barry did not do what Bill Self likes to do, which is give us the exact number and then say you might want to check me on that.
Then hedge his bet.
I thought, yeah, but I think Barry said it with a certain conviction. But I apologize to you and to our podcast listeners for not having had a chance to look that up directly before. Please let us know.
Well, I suspect sometime in the next couple of weeks we'll know about Missouri's bowl ban situation.
Yeah.
The NCAA will know if the appeal is accepted or not. But whether Missouri will serve the bowl ban or not, I'm very interested in the way the season plays out for the Tigers. I just think there's a lot of good football left in this program. And some great matchups, Georgia, Florida, at Kentucky, a kind of a revenge game for Mizzou. Heck, even at Vanderbilt. There's some games that I'm looking forward to seeing.
So, absolutely, for sure. And look, I as of right now, I'd sure like to see the build-up into Missouri having one loss going into that Georgia game. I mean, that'd be really exciting. It'd be good for the program. And I think they're not going to win a national championship this year, but I believe I'm quoting Blair Kerkhoff when I say, is there any program that needs that national title more than Missouri in football or basketball? And maybe there isn't.
There is not. There is not. I've done a scientific study on this. the emotional wherewithal of a fan base, and I think Missouri needs it as much as any fan base in the country.
Well, it's on my mind here in the 75th anniversary of Norm Stewart twirling the 13-hitter in the College World Series to help the Tigers.
1954.
Yeah, beat Rollins College, I think, in the title game.
One of two NCAA championships for Missouri athletics. The other, the inaugural NCAA Indoor Track Championship. So
time for more.
It is time for more for Mizzou. All right, Vahe, thanks a lot. And when we return, we'll hear from Kellis Robinett, who covers Kansas State for the Star and Wichita Eagle. Kellis Robinett, who covers Kansas State for the Kansas City Star and Wichita Eagle, joins us. The Wildcats don't play Saturday. They're coming off a loss to Baylor. That's 2 losses in a row, 2 Big 12 losses, after that encouraging win over Mississippi State. And Kellis, when I look at a common kind of denominator between the last 2 losses, I see a team that's having difficulty running the ball. 126 yards against Oklahoma State, 123 against Baylor. In the Chris Kleiman offense, I think that running the ball is pretty important, especially after what we saw the first couple of games.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than important. It's everything, really. If you watched his North Dakota State teams at all, they did throw it some. They've had great quarterbacks there with Carson Wentz and Easton Stick. But what made them great is when they threw the ball, defenses were so concerned about the run or so off kilter that the guys they were throwing to were wide open. And it was really easy for them. And that's what happened in the first 2 games when they did run the ball effectively and they won the line of scrimmage and they made things easy for Skylar Thompson. He looked great, was completing around 70% of his passes. Pro Football Focus had him as the top-graded quarterback in all of college football. And then all of a sudden, they go into Big 12 play and they see these weird 3-3-5 defenses, and things just aren't clicking the same way. And I know they've had injuries at some key positions, but yeah, it's just interesting because without that running game, everything else is kind of falling apart. The biggest stat I found going back and really digging into the last two games is that they've had 129 plays combined in Big 12 play against Oklahoma State and Baylor, and only one of them has gone for over 30 yards. It was a pass to Sammy Wheeler for 39 yards against Oklahoma State. Other than that, it's all been 29 and under. They've only been averaging 4.5 yards a play. And if other teams aren't going to respect the play action pass, and they're blowing up the run, Kansas State's not going to get a whole lot going. So that's the main thing they need to fix moving forward, I think.
Hey, and when I hear 129 plays, I also think of, that's not what you want offensively either. Not in the Big 12, 65 plays per game, unless you're trying to control the clock and kind of shorten games. So look, Kansas State under Bill Snyder and under Kleiman now, not a typical no huddle breakneck speed offense, but there just needs to be more production here. I mean, not just the rushing yards. I mean, we're talking about total of 25 points in each of the last two games. Just not going to get it done in this conference.
No, it really isn't. And the defense has actually played okay. I mean, you can certainly always ask for more. They've had at times when they've missed tackles, and they had their cornerbacks took some bad angles and bit on some stuff last week that wasn't great. But at the same time, you hold Oklahoma State to 26 points on the road. Boy, you think that's got to give you a great chance to win. And they only scored 13. Baylor, hold them to 31 most of the time you think, okay, that should be enough to keep the offense in the game. But both times Kansas State didn't come really all that close at all. So, I mean, I know Chris Kleiman and those guys will point to the defense just as much as the offense. But from where I'm sitting, they got to find ways to be more effective on offense. That's the big thing I've found. In this conference, as much as teams are starting to come around and play a little bit more defense, you've got to put up at least 30 a game, and they're just not all that close right now. Okay, hey, let's switch gears quickly. We're at the doorstep of basketball season. Teams have started practicing, and media days are upon us. I know Kansas State's is next week, and then the Big 12's is the week after that. But there's an opportunity to make some news before media days in the recruiting world. There's a prospect out of St. Louis, Davian Bradford. I hope I'm pronouncing his first name right, who has got Kansas State listed as a finalist. Interestingly enough, Missouri is also on that list of finalists. It might come down to those two schools. What do you know about Davian Bradford, and what kind of get would this be if Kansas State or Missouri was able to land him? Well, both teams would love to have him. He's a center out of St. Louis, like you said, 7 feet tall. He plays for MoKan Elite, the AAU team in Kansas City that is really, really good. So both teams would absolutely love to have this guy. He's got 17 offers: Arizona State, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, Oklahoma State. They're all involved. So, I mean, this is honestly the type of player that neither one of those schools have gotten really all that often. They've got Rivals has him as the number 18 ranked player in the country. He visited both Kansas State and Missouri. There are a handful of schools involved, but I think it's going to come down to those two. And specifically, if Kansas State could get him, then Bruce Weber could really, drink a beverage of his choice on early signing day, because he would have done, I don't think there's even a probably about it, the best job recruiting that he's done since he got to Kansas State. He's got three players lined up right now for this class, all of which are top 150 Rivals players. 2 are 4-star guys, and another is a 3-star guy. And interestingly, the 3-star player, Luke Kasuke, is also from St. Louis. He plays on the same AAU team as Davian Bradford. So that would be, a great 1-2 punch right there. And the only thing they're really lacking right now is a big man. They've got Nigel Pack and Selton Miguel, who are both guards and wing guys. That's got the makings of, his best class. But if you could add a big man to it, it's a slam dunk. So definitely keep an eye on that. He's announcing at 5 o'clock on Friday.
Hey, and so St. Louis has had a presence on the Kansas State roster under Weber. And not a coincidence that there is Weber is a Midwestern guy, and he's and assistant coaches know that part of the Midwest well. So it wouldn't be a shock to land a St. Louis guy over Missouri, which, by the way, is just lost a St. Louis area guy in Caleb Love, who committed to North Carolina recently. So, beating a Missouri, if it comes down to those two in Missouri's backyard, would not be an unusual circumstance.
No, and Chris Lowry, their associate head coach, has really been the ringleader in all those things. He's got good ties there, and he got Xavier Sneed out of St. Louis, Shania Williams out of St. Louis. If you go back to their first recruiting class here with Bruce Weber, DJ Johnson from St. Louis. So that's been actually one of their very best recruiting grounds. It seems like every year Chris Lowry's going out there making sure they've got good ties to all the players out there. And I guess what makes this, a special deal is just that both him and Lucas Supke, the other guy I mentioned earlier, they're from St. Louis, play for Kansas City AAU team. They got the whole state covered.
All right, Kellis, thanks a lot. And when we return, Jesse Newell, who covers Kansas for the Star and Wichita Eagle, will join us and tell us about the Jayhawks' new offensive coordinator. Jesse Newell, who covers KU for the Star and the Wichita Eagle, is with us. Jesse, even though the Jayhawks don't play this weekend, there is some news on the football front. KU's got a new offensive coordinator. I believe this is number 3 in the Les Miles era. They have played 6 games.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy when you look at it like that. They started with Chip Lindsey, who came in and was very highly regarded, and then he left for the head coaching job at Troy.
Understandable to take a head coaching job for sure.
KU had no protection in his contract to have him leave, which I think that's fine too, probably, just because if he is that in high regard and wants to go take that job, I don't see a major problem with that. Maybe you could have a little bit more protection, but KU didn't. They bring in, after that, Les Kenning, who, an old-time offensive coordinator for Alabama, A&M in the day. Just didn't work out. It really seemed like he's catered a lot to Les Miles and his offense. We see a lot of the Les Miles toss sweeps in there, so it seemed like he was kind of a guy that was sort of getting strong-armed by Les Miles in there. So 6 weeks in, they change over to Brent Dearman, who is an offensive analyst. He's a guy that was the head coach for NAIA's Bethel last season, and they led all of college football in scoring. And so, listen, I know there's the easy jokes to be made about KU football and change, and listen, David Beatty fired his offensive coordinator. All these things happen so quickly. But honestly, Blair, I got to be completely honest with you. This is a really good move, I think, for the Kansas program, because when you talk about what has been the most successful for them this year against Boston College in that 48-point game, they ran a lot of run-pass option plays. Brent Dearman is sort of considered the guru of a run-pass option. A lot of those plays, Carter Stanley came out and said that they were put in the playbook by Brent Dearman, and so he's a young, innovative mind. It seems like KU's best success has come with him kind of pitching into the offense, and as long as Les Miles can sort of stay out of the way and let a guy who does things that maybe he isn't as comfortable with in the offense, I think this could be a very positive development for the Jayhawks.
Will we think that will happen? Will Les Miles allow him to do his thing?
That's the million-dollar question. And seriously, once KU beat Boston College, you sort of saw a higher ceiling for them because, hey, if they go to this, and not to mention Carter Stanley is a guy who ran the run-pass option in high school, very comfortable with it. Every time we talk to him, he talks about those sorts of plays and how he likes doing them. After that, you thought, man, if KU can score 48 against Boston College on the road, what's the potential down the line? But what you saw the next 3 games, and actually KU brought a little bit of the RPO back the last game against Oklahoma, but the next 2 games were basically back to the old school I formation offense. And listen, is there a place for it? Maybe. Maybe you get to goal line setting and you can use it, or maybe there's a certain opponent where you just think, hey, this really will work against them, and you use it a little bit at a time. But I think for this to work fully, Les Miles has to give up the fact that he is going to be considered this bright offensive mind and just be very content with being the CEO of the Kansas football program. And I know we talked about this a couple weeks ago, Blair, when KU beat Boston College. How much fun is that in the locker room? When you're celebrating that victory, and these kids that haven't won, they did win, and you're getting calls from SI does a story on you, and USA Today does a story on you. Bill Self always has the line, when you win, the pie is big enough to go around. So if you're Les Miles, you got hired to be the CEO, to be the motivator, to be the recruiter, to be the face of the program, and then to take the credit when you win football games. So if it's not your offense, who cares if it's not your offense? If it's Brent Dearman's offense, who cares if it's Brent Dearman's offense? If it produces 48 points and produces victories and makes you seem like a smart coach, that to me seems like the right way to go.
So Dearman had the success as a player and as one season as a head coach at Bethel, as you said. I think that's Bethel, Tennessee, too.
Correct.
It's not Kansas.
Not
Bethel.
Kansas, yep.
But he's also had some Division I assistant coaching experience. He was at Auburn for a little bit, not as an offensive coordinator, but I think he was an analyst there too, maybe a running game analyst. So He's young, and but it strikes me as an infusion of energy maybe for this offense. It's averaging, I think, 23 points, 22-8 or something like that. In the Big 12, unless you're going to be a program that plays a brand of offensive football that is just so alien that opponents aren't ready for it, like Army, or Navy, military academy type offense, which I've often thought Kansas should do if they're not going to have the horses. But they do have some weapons. Kansas does have offensive weapons. As you said, we saw him at Boston College. Get somebody in there who has had proven success at running this type of offense.
Yeah, it's sort of fascinating on a lot of levels. I know Les Miles mentioned specifically the recruiting part of this. Obviously Les Miles is into what helps them get recruits, and to have a guy sort of the antithesis of Les Kenning. I mean, Les Kenning's 60 years old, has been around the block. I mean, many jobs. Yes, sort of let Les Miles kind of do what he wanted to do. And then you've got on the very opposite end, Brent Dearman, who, hey, this is the flashy offense. And if you go on Twitter, like once he was announced the guy, I mean, he has people all over who love him. He's the guy that will go on podcasts and if a coach emails him about what to do on this particular RPO play, he'll email them back. And he has 2 different books on the RPO. I mean, just very well respected. I've had a few brief conversations with him. I mean, just seems like a genuinely a guy that you want to talk with, that seems open, that you like being around, that sort of thing. And as an analyst, you can't technically be an on-field coach for Kansas. So to get him out there with guys like Carter Stanley and the rest of the offense, I think that could be positive as well. I also think it's sort of, you look at maybe 2 schools of thought with football, and I think this is sort of what you battle. You kind of have to go one of 2 directions. Either the pro side of things is usually you cater to your opponent. You have a bunch of time to prepare and you do things that you think are going to be good against your opponent. Or you kind of go the Mike Leach style, which is, hey, we are just going to practice this thing that we do so well. We can call the play out across to the other team, but we're just going to out-execute you. And then with the RPO, you have the added element, which is, hey, if this linebacker is a half step in the wrong spot, or if this guy tries to do his job and the safety's job instead of just his job, we're going to pick that apart because that is what is ingrained in the offense. So kind of if you look at this from a big picture perspective, Brent Dearman sort of has that second mindset, which is like, we can call out the play across, but there's so many different options with this. It makes it very difficult on an opponent to counter that. And then also, KU, if you have enough repetition with that, and that's what you're going to do, you're going to try to out-execute your opponent and just know better what you're going to do, then they can counteract it. So I think for Kansas, this can be a big shift. Once again, if Les Miles allows it to be a big shift. So we saw one game really where Kansas kind of turned the reins over of the RPO, and they had great success with it. They did a little bit more against Oklahoma. This might not be perfect. Obviously, the first game they're going to have with the new offense is at Texas, so that might not go well because any offense might not go well at Texas. But you mentioned it, Blair. I mean, Andrew Parchment, Dalen Charlotte. You go back to Puka Williams. They have some
pieces.
They've got some pieces that you should be able to work with. And for Les Miles to make this change midway through the season when he didn't have to, I think it's an encouraging sign. I think it's the right timing. I think it's the right move. I think it's the right guy to get in here because Brent Dearman probably would have been an offensive coordinator for some other Division I program if you did not hire him.
Good point.
So I think all these things are a positive if Les Miles gets out of the way. And so that's kind of the last 6 weeks. So we'll know if Les Miles continues to run those power toss sweeps. If that happens, then Brent Dearman isn't getting the offense. And if he's not getting the offense, then a lot of things probably won't improve for KU football.
And he won't be here. All right, Jesse, thanks a lot. We will talk to you again next week.
Sounds good, Blair.
When we return, Sam McDowell joins me to review the unexpectedly disappointing season from Sporting KC and where the organization might go from here personnel-wise.
When it comes to saving big on tires, do the math at Big O Tires. Start by saving $100 instantly on sets of 4 Big O brand tires with paid installation purchase. Then receive an additional $50 by mail-in rebate on qualifying purchases using your Big O Tires credit card. Add it all up, and you can save as much as $150. The tires you need, the savings you want. Only at Big O Tires, the team you trust. Hurry, sale ends October 13th. For the location nearest you, go to bigotires.com.
Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/sportsbeatkc offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Sam McDowell is here. Sam covers the Chiefs now, but spent most of the season and most of the last few years covering Sporting Kansas City. So who better to talk about SKC and wrap up their season than Sam McDowell? Sam, any other time in the last decade, if we're wrapping up Sporting Kansas City season, we're talking about either a cup victory or a playoff loss, and
not doing it in early October.
And we're not doing it the first week in October. You're absolutely right. Which says something about Sporting Kansas City's season. Let me just quickly run down the final numbers. They finished 10-16-8, 11th in the West. First time they didn't qualify for the playoffs since, I believe, 2010. So it has been a great decade.
8 straight years.
Yeah, great decade for Sporting Kansas City. The most consistent winner on the professional Major League Kansas City sporting scene, but not this year for Sporting Kansas City. Let's briefly touch on what went wrong for SKC, and then we'll get into what we're going to see different next year. What went wrong for Sporting Kansas City this year?
To me, I still trace back to a series that you and I have talked about before, which is that Champions League series. Because for the first month of this season, this team actually looked capable of doing everything that they had done last year, which last year they were within one half shy of going to MLS Cup. I mean, they had Portland beat on their home field and ended up giving that up, obviously. But first month of the season, I thought they looked great. They played well in MLS play. They were cycling back and forth between that and Champions League, advanced further in Champions League than any other MLS team.
Semifinals.
Yeah, and then they just got absolutely clobbered in that Monterrey series. First on the road, and then at home, I thought that they shouldn't have stuck with their starters because the series was over.
5-0 loss,
They lost
right?
5-0 on the road. That's an aggregate scoring in a two-game series, and I think that they put the starters back out there to sort of rebuild some confidence. I think Peter Vermees had already sensed that game had done some damage to him. Tries to rebuild the confidence in the second leg. Instead, it doubles down the other way, and I thought you saw a team that never mentally recovered from that. Then you've got injuries factored in. Then you've got guys that don't have as good a season. You've got an aging core, and just all that together sort of formulated what you saw at the final product.
In hindsight, it's obviously because of the way the season unfolded. You can say that it was a bad idea. So just being part of it and then reacting to it the way that they did. In the moment, I loved it. It was an opportunity for this organization and the league.
The league as a whole. That's an important aspect. I mean, I haven't heard this directly, but certainly the league wanted Sporting Kansas City as the last remaining team to put its best foot forward in that Champions League competition. But I just think it doomed the rest of the season. They had too much going on at once, and just it's crazy the way that schedule factors in the first place, that you're playing it so early in the year. Maybe if it happened later in the year, they've got some points accumulated and they can sort of rebound from that because they know they're a good team based on the evidence of what's happened over 3 months. But when they'd only played about a month of the season, I just didn't think they had anything to sort of fall back on to refine their comfort level at all.
And keep in mind, the Sporting Kansas City team that entered this year was the West Division champ, set a club record with 65 goals last year. I don't know what the preseason polls were like. I don't know if they were the favorite going into this year.
Second, I think LAFC, based on the moves they had added, and they finished third last year, them and Sporting Kansas City played for first place on the final day of last year's regular season. They had a lot more offseason moves and money. I mean, that's what it came down to, that they spent, that I think a lot of people thought they were the favorite, but Sporting Kansas City was right there behind them.
Knowing what a competitor Peter Vermees is, this has to be a crushing season for him. I did see a quote in the after the finale, which they lost 6-0 to Dallas. I did see a quote from him saying, "Look, we didn't deserve to be in the playoffs," and for him to say that, I didn't know if I'd ever see something like that. But he was optimistic, even toward the end of the season when they. Was it the recent game where they had the early 2-0 lead at
against
home?
Colorado, yeah.
And ended up losing 3-2.
Matt Beasler got ejected in that game because they picked up 2 yellow cards, and then sudden. There were so many games like that this year, though, to where you sort of did the math in your head going into the game, like, oh, if you can get 3 here, you might be able to get yourself back into it. I certainly remember a home match against FC Dallas when FC Dallas was holding on to that last playoff spot. I think Sporting was maybe 4 or 5 points behind. Similar situation against Real Salt Lake in, I want to say, late August. And then that Colorado match, you felt like you had to win them all at that point. But still, I thought there were 3 matches all on your home field to where you felt like if you get 3 points, you might feel like you're back in this thing, you got a chance. And just, it was so bizarre the way all 3 of those unfolded. Salt Lake, they had a lead.
Right.
Dallas, I felt like they never showed up for a game that they should have been as motivated for as any they had all season. In that Colorado game, a bad Colorado team, you're up 2 goals and you get a player sent off. I mean, it was just sort of the snowball effect on this team all year long.
So they go into the last game. There's nothing on the line for Sporting. So 4 homegrown players in the lineup for Sporting in that final game. Interesting lineup call.
Yeah. I actually think that there was actually quite a bit on the line, though, because and I think it's something you and I will get to. I think a lot of guys were playing for jobs in that match. And I obviously haven't talked to Peter since that match happened, but knowing him and like you know him as well, I mean, I think that's going to affect the way he views some guys when their exit meetings happen this week.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the prospective changes for Sporting Kansas City. Maybe in terms of a roster makeover as dramatic as any that we've seen in the last decade since they've started this run?
I think that's fair to predict. This team's gone through a lot of changes every offseason, and relative to what you see in some other sports, I think, especially with the local teams here. But there's always been that core backbone of the team, the guys that you can sort of rattle off that have been here forever. Part of all 4 of their trophies that they've won with Matt Beasler, Seth Sinovic, Roger Espinoza left for a couple of years in Europe, but I still consider him part of that core group, and then Graham Zusi. And in this later adaptation, Tim Milia's been part of that. Benny Fellaubert has been back here and part of that. And I think that based on the age of those guys and the performance you saw this season, that core is not going to be the same core. And I don't know which guys that's not going to include, but it's not going to include all those guys I just mentioned. I'd be so shocked if all of those guys are back in Sporting Kansas City uniforms next year.
Well, in terms of age, how many are 30-ish?
All those guys I just listed are at least 32. They'll be 33 at some point next year.
Which is, look, in pro athlete years, in most sports, kind of beyond your peak.
It is. Goalies, we see a little bit with goalkeepers in soccer that they're kind of, I mean, Nick Raimondo and Tim Howard, if not 40, they're close to it, and it's their last year in MLS this year. So you can play deeper as a goalkeeper, but where age comes into play in all sports is the speed. Mm-hmm. And this is a sport where you need speed, and it's a team that so glaringly lacked it all year long.
Okay, so how about on the staff? What any prospective changes there?
No, I mean, talked to ownership this week, and the staff's going to be back. Now, they did have a change mid-season and their fitness coach with Mateus Manuel. They moved on from him as an interim guy. They hired Joey Hedrick, and he's going to be the full-time guy. But Peter Vermees is going to get a shot at turning this around. And, I mean, those of us who have covered other franchises in this town, I mean, this team's been blessed with Peter Vermees. He deserves a shot to turn this thing around.
No doubt about it. No doubt. Even when Sporting Kansas City is winning, he is still their harshest critic. And I've always appreciated that about him, that he never satisfied. Even when things are going well, there's always something to find, to improve on.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he's been as successful as he has been.
Yeah, I remember when I kind of wrote maybe a little bit more expansive feature on him last year and talked to some of the assistant coaches about that. And I should point out the assistant coaches are going to remain in place as well. But talked to Kerry Zavagnin, who played with Peter, and he's been on his staff ever since he's been here. And he told a story about how they had won U.S. Open Cup in Philadelphia, and that was not their most recent one. So that would have been the 2015 U.S. Open Cup. And it was late September. And they're on the bus after the game. And, of course, the players are kind of soaked in champagne. And first thing Peter says was about talking about their match coming up on Saturday, their MLS regular season match. The very first thing out of his mouth. And they kind of thought, this is why you do it, though. This is what you should be enjoying, but he's just always, that's just the way he's built. He's always looking for the next thing.
All right, so even though it was something of a lost season for Sporting Kansas City, it was a season, and so let's think about who a team MVP might have been for Sporting Kansas City this year. Who would you who would you identify? They had some highlights. They had some moments.
The two guys that I think the one guy that was really most consistent throughout the year was Felipe Gutierrez, partly because the cliche is your best ability is availability, and during that stretch when everybody was out, he was the one workhorse. And I did think he got into a moment where he was trying to do too much because he knew everybody that was out. He could sense the way the season was going, the tide of it, and was trying to flip that. But he played well for him this year. To me, Johnny Russell should be absolutely part of this, the future. Whoever is going to be around them, I still think he's your most dynamic weapon up to in that sort of attacking three that you have there. But when we talked about who's not going to be back, I mean, that's something they have to address absolutely, is they're going to have to get a striker this next year, because they had nobody on that roster who could consistently put easy chances away. Because Peter Vermes said this often, and you go back and watch the games, and it's accurate. They created chances this year. They should not have scored, 16 fewer goals than they did last year. They didn't have a striker last year. They broke a club record with 65 goals last year. This year, I think 48, 49, whatever that number ended up. And it was because that position just so much involved him in the attacking front, and they just didn't have a guy that could put away goals.
Busio was fun to was fun to watch, and gave him a real burst of energy when he came on the scene.
And I certainly wonder what the future holds for him, immediate future, because I think long-term future, it's hard to call it a consensus in any sport, but I think a lot of people think he's going to be a valuable player, whether it's here, whether they end up getting cash for him at some point and he plays elsewhere, I don't know. But I am interested to see if they consider him a guy they can really rely on at 17 years old next year. I think he'll turn 18, and it's April or May or early in the year. But how early do they want to involve him and sort of the backbone of the team?
Right. Okay, Sam, good stuff. Appreciate you stopping by, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Blair.
That'll do it for another week of Sports Beat KC, sponsored by Big O Tires. They wanted to give a shout out to our listeners who have purchased subscriptions through the ad you hear during the podcast. You know, that $30 a year ad. You're helping us support this podcast and the Stars sports coverage, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks to Kathy Liu and Leah Becerra, who worked their producing magic this week from places other than Kansas City. Travel safe, you guys. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, give us a rate and a good review. Check some of the stars, 5 of them. It helps. Hey, we'll be back next week to talk sports in Kansas City, starting with Monday's show reviewing the Chiefs game against the Houston Texans.